that actually is that's the key to success, is
Okay.
understanding that transforming an economy takes a minimum of 10 years, in a lot of cases longer than that. Transforming an economy today requires not just understanding what you have at your fingertips that can be parlayed into the future and be applicable to technology based economies. It also absolutely mandatorily, if that's a word, uh, demands coalitions.
Welcome back to Exploring Growth. The topic today is focused on this idea of what happens to mid-sized cities when technology, thinking about AI a lot, when it moves fast and it kind of favors those who are closest to it. I'm pleased to be sitting down today with Julie Huls, founder and CEO at the Waymaker Group. She's involved in some very interesting work, I think you'll find, helping emerging cities or mid-sized cities mobilize their citizens, their institutions, and their entrepreneurs. So welcome to the show, Julie.
Great. Good afternoon. Great to be with you. Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, when we were introduced, the sort of phrase of building a more economically diverse America stuck out to me in all the things I read about what you guys are doing. And then when we were able to sit down and kind of talk about what we were going to talk about on the show, I kind of was able to sort of scratch the itch a little bit on what does this mean by economically diverse America. So I want to get into this conversation, but first, tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe about your story, where you came from, and your company.
Very good. Happy to. And you hit really right in the center of our mission. And our mission really is driven very much by my personal and professional background. I started the company ultimately to ensure that our middle tier cities in the middle US were getting access to really groundbreaking and effective practices as it relates to centering economies around technology. We know that technology is not going to go anywhere. You're right, AI is going to impact all of us. It's already started. But the question really is, how can we move out of some of the old traditional and local only methodologies and mindsets that we have been using traditionally in this country, and really proactively embrace what we know is going to be transformative change? So that background really was informed and I would say very much driven and defined by some early experiences I had growing up in the middle US. I was raised actually on a farm in central Illinois, Champaign County, and really watched and experienced the decline of the agricultural and manufacturing economies in that part of our country, right? And I'm not alone. Those declines impacted millions of us in the middle US. And so while the powerhouses that we know today, the powerhouses of tech, were building their ecosystems 30 and 40 and even 50 years ago, and I'm thinking specifically about markets like Boston and Silicon Valley, there were millions of the rest of us who were maybe lagging in adopting new technologies, and definitely lagging as it relates to embracing technology when it comes to forging new economic development principles. So that hopefully sort of ties in sort of where I think we're headed as a country, right? In terms of
Sure.
all of us really need to be thinking about how we center economic growth, and very especially, how do we make sure that all of our citizens get equitable access to opportunity in technology? And we can define, by the way, technology very, very broadly. I think that's an important
Sure.
point too.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, because you have technology advances in different domains like manufacturing,
Absolutely.
and then of course, with all of the B2B SaaS companies that are providing a certain type of service on the other end of the spectrum. It's it's varied and it's very complex.
No question.
And so when we break this down, you're meeting with these sort of mid-sized cities, or do you also call them emerging cities? Or are those a
We
different?
do. Yep.
Okay,
All kinds of terms for them, right?
okay,
Middle tier markets, middle US cities, emerging markets, nascent markets. And I would say we have really quickly developing ecosystems in the middle US too. We can talk about that.
yeah, yeah. So at the heart of what you're doing, you're really talking about um, something that I think is on a lot of people's minds with this onset of AI, and that is job loss, or kind of rethinking how people work. The onset of the internet that redefined how we work, and now
Yeah.
you've seen that play out to where we have people that, a lot of people work remotely now. I don't know
That's
what the
right.
percentage is, but it's pretty high percentage.
Yeah.
Um, and it's funny. I was talking to a client of mine the other day about this clip I saw on Elon Musk talking about work from home
Mhm.
culture, and how it was like not really maybe an absolute thought that he had, but it seemed like it. He was very much against the work from home or laptop warriors, as he called them. I thought that was
Right.
kind of interesting.
Mhm.
He's making cars and rockets, and so he looks around and says, "Look, there's people here, making things." And I get that not all jobs are actually putting your hands on something and making them. There is a management aspect to it that has to be there, and
Yes.
there's a lot of thinking that involves not necessarily putting your hands on something, and that could be done remote. So
Yeah.
I'm not really necessarily 100% behind his thinking there.
Right.
But it is interesting how our work has changed over the years, and now with the onset of AI, we're going to see it change even again, and more exponentially, I think. Um, so as that plays out in the local aspect, because you're
Mhm.
working with cities to help them sort of take the vision that they have for what they want their city to be economically,
Mhm.
and help them walk towards that
That's
vision.
right.
So how does that play out when you talk about like remote work and hybrid work, and in office or
Mhm.
on site work? Because
Mhm.
there's all kinds of things that are part of that
That,
discussion.
yeah, that's exactly right. Well, and I think we start actually at a place that is probably at the, 30,000, 40,000 foot level,
Hmm.
meaning how do we get, to your point, to a place where we have more human beings that are walking around in very dynamic environments? We know that these dense, dynamic environments really do foster creativity. They foster,
Hmm.
problem solving. That's, by the way, why place based economic development is really getting its time in the sun. That's something else that we specialize in. And so we really start sort of with those major questions, right? Has this particular community suffered from economic decline? In a lot of cases, the answer is yes, or they've suffered from just really stagnant economies.
Hmm.
Have they suffered from population loss? And that is something that you can imagine is pretty painful, not just to the community itself and to small and local businesses, but also, of course, to the economy. And then the question really, again, starts with what might this particular region or community have at its fingertips that will enable it to take steps forward into the future and into
Hmm.
technology, right? And in some cases, there is an AI component. In some cases, there's not. We are
Hmm.
talking about actually maybe AI or other systems based technologies impacting, traditional manufacturing businesses,
Hmm.
right? And so we really start our work by getting to know some of the key leaders. This is, by the way, hard work. Transforming economies is, you
Oh
said
yeah,
it, complicated.
yeah,
And
very complex. Yeah,
yeah, it requires the work of a lot of human beings there in market. And
yeah,
it's not just arduous, it takes a long time to turn an economy around. So
and getting everyone to work together, that's probably the hardest part.
yeah, and I really want to spend a moment on that if we can
Sure.
at some point, because that actually is that's the key to success, is
Okay.
understanding that transforming an economy takes a minimum of 10 years, in a lot of cases longer than that. Transforming an economy today requires not just understanding what you have at your fingertips that can be parlayed into the future and be applicable to technology based economies. It also absolutely mandatorily, if that's a word, uh, demands coalitions, right? And that's sort of a technical, even a government term. But to your point, it takes uh, these individuals working together. A lot of wordplay has been given to that
Hmm.
concept over the years. But I'll tell you, just as a practical matter, we know that and a big part of the help that we also offer to markets is to help them find funding for these efforts, right?
Sure.
Believe it or not, turning economies around is also a very expensive business. Some of our major federal programs, there's a lot of major money out there right now, from coming from the feds, coming
Hmm.
from private industry, coming from even philanthropists. They are saying, we know that this is hard work. We are no longer going to give to a single institution. So to answer your question, we come into a market, we identify who are the champions, who, for example, represents the entrepreneurs in this group, who represents the technology CEOs,
Hmm.
right? Who are those individuals? Who are the government entities? Who are the higher education entities, workforce and training entities? And then how can we look at what they have? And then finally, how do we begin to truly assemble healthy, sustainable partnerships and dynamics that will lay new groundwork and form the basis of a
Hmm.
new foundation that we know is going to work in tech-based ecosystems, right?
Yeah.
Those are new concepts for us in this country as it relates to economic development.
Yeah, and you mentioned having everyone working together is key, and I agree. That's what everyone's trying to do it with everything, right? It's
With
just it's
everything.
super
Yeah,
hard. It's
that's right.
super hard,
Even a
especially with this.
company. Yeah,
Yeah, and you have all these different parties. You mentioned the funding. You have the entrepreneurs or the actual companies. You have the institutions,
that's right.
cities, the citizens.
Right.
The politics of it all. It's a very complex animal to understand and have all kind of rowing in the same direction as you go into new markets and you're working with your clients, what are some of the key ingredients that you would point to that kind of apply to anywhere you would go of success? Meaning, if you go into, you know, somewhere in Ohio and
Mhm.
they're saying, "Hey, here's our vision to this is what we want our city to look like," and here, what are you looking at for key kind of ingredients that when you look around, okay, yes, this will actually work, when we start working together.
Yeah, great question. And hopefully, this is inspiring
Mhm.
to your audience. By the way, I love what you're doing. What you're doing is very important, right? Making sure that we are sharing information about
Mhm.
entrepreneurial and business growth best practices is very similar to what we do. We're doing it sort of at a city level or regional level, but the practices, to answer your question, are really the same.
Mhm.
To put a finer point on it, we really have to, and we go straight towards where there is a high concentration of industry leadership. And by that, what I mean is, are there entrepreneurial organizations within that market? Are they representing founders or more established companies? By the
Mhm.
way, we need both. We need the early
Sure.
stage companies to have a voice in these economic development efforts. We need seriously, and certainly that is later stage companies to have a voice in this.
Mhm.
The short answer is, we have to work in markets where industry has an organized presence, and that's for a lot of reasons. Training partners don't know how to develop training programs unless they know which jobs they're training for. Funders cannot write checks towards these transformative efforts unless there is an industry voice at the table.
Mhm.
For many years, when business was strictly local, it made sense for us as a country to give to single institutions, right? That we were giving, the feds, for example, were giving millions of dollars to higher education institutions. They were giving them to other local or state governments. And now those funders are saying, we could do that, but we're not going to do it until there's proof that there's a business voice at the table.
Yeah.
So I would highly also encourage your audience to get involved in some of these efforts. It sounds boring, but but great news. It's not.
Yeah.
Another piece of great news: we need your voices sitting around these tables.
Yeah.
We can't be effective in designing, future economies until we understand where business is going. Business is driving all of this growth, right?
Hmm. Do you need sort of these incubator type of I'm thinking of like a food hall, right, for restaurants, but like
Yeah.
incubators that have lots of different startups. Do you
Yeah.
need something like that to really kick things off, or does it matter if a city doesn't already have something like that in place?
Yeah, that's a great question. It doesn't matter
Okay.
if they don't have an incubator or accelerator
Yeah.
structure or program or entity. We don't need one. What we still need, however, is some sort of an organized um, presence
Presence.
of activity,
Yeah.
right? And
Okay.
it can absolutely be informal, right? We're working in markets, in fact, right now
Mhm.
that are emerging that don't necessarily yet have incubators or accelerators. And maybe the local chamber of commerce, which has been the sort of traditional
Mhm.
local business place for CEOs to go, maybe they're not really into sort of where we're going, and that's okay too. We are working with informal networks of early stage companies, and then of course we're working with some of the Fortune 500 companies, even Fortune 100 companies, individually in other markets that we serve.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just saying this as an observation. It sounds like the old school traditional uh, kind of chamber of commerce approach needs to be modernized. I mean, it's in my opinion, I haven't been a part of a chamber of commerce in I don't know how many years,
Yeah.
and I don't really know how much value they bring to the local service based company,
Right.
that knocks on doors. I
Right.
don't really know if there's any value there or not. So I don't
Right.
want to speak negatively on it, but I think in large part, if you were to do a poll, most people would
Mhm.
say, yeah, we need basically a modern day version of what the chamber's role was.
Yeah.
And I think your company coming in and kind of corralling all of these different entities is the start of that. It's just like the start of trying to rebirth what the old chamber was.
That's right. Yeah. And I think you've got it. I have to say, we don't want to throw every chamber of commerce out the window. I know that's not what
Right.
you said,
Right.
Lee, and I have to also sort of brag that we actually right now are working with a handful of very progressive chambers of
Hmm.
commerce, right? Chambers, though, we can say this in a blanket fashion, and that is, and this is was very, very true in Austin. I've spent 25 years in that market, and 10 of which I led the Austin Technology Council. And the Chamber of Commerce in Austin was absolutely visionary. They were pro entrepreneur, they were pro technology, but way before many other chambers around the country were
Hmm.
all of those things. So I have to give them major props. And I have to also just give some of our current clients who are very progressive chambers props. But generally speaking, yes, you are very right. I think it's not even just about sort of blowing up the old chamber model. It is also us as a country looking at all of our systems, right? Because our
Hmm.
systems are no longer serving, for the most part, industry. Our workforce training programs, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're a higher education institution, a technical college, a community college. Again, I'm not throwing all of them under the bus because we have a number of amazing clients in each one of
Sure.
those categories. But the more successful institutions and agencies and chambers are the ones who 20 years ago adopted these pro tech, pro entrepreneur, pro business principles and policies. Right? They are segregating programming by technology cluster. Right?
Hmm.
They if for example they have aerospace, they have a high concentration of aerospace and defense entrepreneurs. They are really catering the events, the networking, the resources within that market to that section, to
Hmm.
that category of entrepreneurs. And same goes for biotech, et cetera. But these are best practices again in our more advanced markets, mostly on the East and West Coast, that they have been practicing for decades. Some of us, a lot of us in the middle part of the US are just catching on to it. But last plug for my friends here in the middle US and our clients, they are adopting very quickly and they are deploying very quickly. COVID lit a fire under
Mm.
everyone. It really has been a serious impetus as it relates to adopting these pro tech policies sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. And so as I listen to what you're saying, I guess what I take from it is that their focus really is more on the entrepreneurs and making sure that they have and technology companies making sure that they have what they need to grow in their environment.
That's right.
Because of course, economically, that's where the new revenue is going to come, the new jobs are going to come.
Absolutely.
So then it's aligning those sort of almost like a consortium, formally or informally, between
That's right.
those companies with the city and other parties that are that have weight.
That's
Is that
exactly.
okay?
Yeah, you've got it. And the cities again that are open and all of the cities we work with are almost desperate to connect to this band of entrepreneurs, right?
Sure.
Regardless of technology category. Um, Again, because first of all, entrepreneurs don't have time, right? I'm betting that
Right.
99.9% of your CEOs or
Yeah.
executives that you cater to through your
Yeah.
podcast don't have time to show up to meaningless
Yeah.
meetings at City Hall, etc. So I respect that, but the progressive and the smart municipalities,
Hmm.
state governments, higher education institutions that are so desperate for that kind of engagement, they wise up really quickly to what it takes to corral and
Yeah.
to engage those entrepreneurs, right? And it takes
Right.
time. The other note I have to mention is that smart public entities that are seeking and eventually secure the engagement of your audience also recognize that there's a language barrier, right? We know already,
Hmm.
obviously, there's a massive culture barrier, right?
Hmm.
Business leaders live and breathe to get things done and to move quickly and to experiment and to break glass and to fix
That's right.
problems and to grow and to hire and to revenue. And government in the past, I
Hmm.
think things are changing for the better, has not been motivated by any of those things, right?
Right.
Higher education in the past has not been motivated to do any of those things. And so, again, the more savvy public institutions are bringing these business groups, the entrepreneurs to the table and saying, we know that we don't speak your language.
Hmm.
So please tell us how we can help you. Tell us what you need. Let's recognize there's going to be a language and some culture and even timing, right?
Yeah.
Barriers. But again, savvy ones are going to be persistent and they're going to be smart about how they speak to entrepreneurs and really get them to come to the
Yeah.
table.
It sounds like vision is really at the core of all of this, because if there's a strong vision and you have people in the city that are behind that vision and hopefully a part of or instrumental in casting that vision, then it's going to start to take shape. As I'm thinking more through this and we're talking, I'm thinking about the entrepreneur, business, business owner, company that I'm just wondering, yeah, they don't have time. They don't have time to really think about this as being a problem or being, think about any solutions. They're
Right.
working to build their company.
Right.
I think that when it comes across their desk, it has to do with their top or bottom line, you know.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering, like, what's in it for them on the front end of building all of this out? Because I think that there's a lot of benefit on the mid to end of building this out, where they get the benefit of the ecosystem, right? Um, but if it's at sort of the beginning, what's the benefit to them?
Yeah, great question. And I have lots of answers. Let me touch really quickly first on the vision piece, and
Yeah.
then I definitely will answer your question about what's in it for entrepreneurs. The vision piece actually is the hardest part.
Hmm.
It sounds easy. I think business executives, founders, entrepreneurs are really savvy about this.
Right.
They are trained and cultured over many years to practice the art of articulating a vision, testing a vision, refining a vision, pivoting from the original vision or the
That's right.
second or third vision, right?
Because they have to be focused.
Yeah, I mean that's just part of our DNA. That is not the case for public entities. I don't have to
Right.
tell you. And again, I have to be careful. I don't want to throw everybody under the bus here, but
Yeah, no,
that's
I
just
think everybody understands.
yeah, it's just sort of not part of their culture. And so
Yeah.
again, the savvy public entities are the ones who are going to put the strawman vision out on the table,
Mhm.
but then say to industry, we need your help. We know that we developed this with our lens. We need to know a number of things. First of all, does this resonate with you at all? Second of all, please help us as a public institution understand where your technology is going.
Mhm.
Help educate us about AI. I mean, there are so few policymakers or folks within higher ed, unless you're a researcher in this arena, that understand what AI is, what is quantum, how's it going to impact society,
Mhm.
how is it going to impact my economy. So there's a lot of education, language barrier, et cetera, right? And vision articulation that I think these two entities, for profit and public entities, can work on together. And I cannot emphasize that enough. There's a lot of upfront work that really needs to happen there. And
Yeah.
then to answer your question about, what's in it for an entrepreneur, I would encourage your entrepreneurs to get engaged because they have, first of all, the leverage. Second of all, government has the ability to make changes in arenas that are actually very important to business leaders.
Mhm.
Talent recruitment, right? There are a number of states and cities that have really developed some interesting policies as it relates to bringing talent in from other markets, right? A lot of cities and states have historically been incentivizing businesses to increase job creation within their respective markets. The other sort of, and this is a relatively new trend, but government is getting more and more involved in. They've always been involved in things like housing, child care, and I would put sort of place making in this bucket, right?
Mhm.
But what are the things, school districts, right? School performance, crime. There are a number of levers, if you will, that impact companies very directly, right? If you're an executive and you're trying to bring in new employees from out of market and they can't find homes that are affordable to live
Mhm.
in their market, that's a lever that their respective city can push on. I've been in a number of conversations between state governments, local municipalities, and major companies that involved housing supply, right? You wouldn't think that would be a normal sort of economic development thing, but it is. Same
Right.
with childcare, right? And same with literally the sort of almost like customer experiences that entrepreneurs and their employees have within a city, right? That's what Austin got right. That's another thing that Austin got right. And
Mhm.
I'm going to brag about folks that I got to work with Chamber and Opportunity Austin, et cetera. They were amazing about promoting not that, hey, if you're a tech employee, come to Austin. That was a secondary sort of value proposition. The first one was come to Austin because we have great stuff to do. We're a fun city.
Yeah.
We've got art, we have music, we have this amazing outdoor lifestyle. Come check out our barbecue and our other restaurants.
Right.
They led with the lifestyle and the placemaking or place specific qualities. And so those are the levers that cities can pull that businesses really need to kind of,
Yeah.
again, be
Quality of
articulate
life.
about. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's when I think of Austin. I think of food and music. I haven't been yet, but that's why I would want to go,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And to think now that it's becoming a tech hub and all these other things that it's becoming
Right.
that I don't even know.
Yeah.
It's really it really is a good. I mean, it's a shining star example. So I think manufacturing. Okay, you have cities that do have an industry of some size, and you want to attract new people there. So you
Mhm.
have to focus on all of these things, right? And you have to look at
Right.
how can we put our best foot forward and work through the next decade of building what we want it to be,
That's
because
right.
we have assuming that um, automation and AI don't
Mhm.
um, take away those jobs that we want to create for manufacturing, that whole plan makes sense. What about keeping entrepreneurs that are doing something that is very tech forward, and they're looking at places like Austin and Boston and New York and these other places where they could just move there and be
Mhm.
a part of that scene. They don't have to wait 8 years or however long. How
Yeah.
do you keep those people there?
Yeah, yeah, that's another great question. What we are finding is that a number of these middle tier cities, and I'm thinking about places like, we're working right now in Oklahoma City, Wichita, Kansas, by the way, on
Mhm.
fire. There are smaller markets, right? Lansing, Michigan is on fire right now. Places, Madison, Wisconsin, on fire. There are these pockets of communities that are doing the lifestyle thing very, very well. And what we are finding is that younger generations in particular are saying maybe we go to New York or Silicon Valley or Boston or some of the other, we can put Austin in that category for the first few years of our career.
Yeah,
We get skills, we work alongside, really inspiring peers, but we're working in a really deep pool. But at the end of the day, my value system is a little different. I actually don't want to work 14 hours a day. I
mhm.
don't want to work 10.
Yeah, that's a good
I,
point.
I want to
Yeah,
have a family. I want to have a life. I
yeah.
like I like hanging
I
out
want
with
to
my
live on the
dog.
lake.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
And so we're finding that there is this exodus out of some of these urban markets,
yeah,
right? Especially for entrepreneurs and talent of a certain sort of chapter within their life, and they're going to these smaller pockets because they can afford to buy a house.
yeah,
They are listened to by the public entities, right? They have, maybe these cities have really cool, water features and river walks and
yeah.
other fun, like
Whatever's
great
appealing, right?
restaurants. Yeah, like craft beer
Yeah.
center of gravity. I mean, it's like they're just, there's a
Access to
value.
outdoor activities.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah,
exactly right. That is clearly a driving force, right? I
right.
mean, 90% is not a real number. That's a made up sort of anecdotal number, but the
Yeah,
majority of the of
a
the
lot of
folks that
people
we
want it.
see, a lot of people want it. Yeah, they want to live healthy lifestyles. They're more focused on wellness and
Hmm.
wellness first, career second. And
Hmm.
so there actually is a bit of a resurgence coming into, certain pockets of the United States, which of
Yeah.
course we love to see.
It's funny too because anecdotally, I've talked to some colleagues and friends and some clients that are in tech, and they've said that a lot of their friends that are have been in tech, developers, engineers, are getting out of tech and they're moving into businesses, like starting buying businesses that are much more practical, retail type businesses,
Yeah.
service businesses,
Yes.
outdoor businesses.
Right.
Um,
I believe it.
Partly because of the AI thing that's happening. They see what's happening and they don't want to be kind of squashed by it. So I
Right.
think there's a little bit of a, true practical fear and then some fear, some irrational fear,
Hmm.
personal opinion. But then I
Hmm.
think
Yeah.
people are kind of just done chasing the tech, you know, behemoth and that whole lifestyle. So they want to get back to what, living used to look back maybe in the 80s and 90s.
That's right. I completely agree. We're hearing some of the same things. And I think also COVID gave us a bit of an existential moment of reflection, right?
Yeah.
Where I think between younger generation looking to their parents and seeing their parents get completely burned out on that lifestyle, they're
Right.
saying, first of all, I don't want that. And second of
Hmm.
all, it wasn't even worth it, right?
Right.
The money's not even that great anymore because I still can't afford to buy a house. Or they're saying, we just want to live a different life.
Yeah.
And I think also this, the remote thing, that verdict is still out. I think I'm a pro remote worker person, just for the
Hmm.
record. I don't have anything against it. And clearly every company just needs to make its own decision.
Hmm.
But it's no accident that we're finding companies, a lot of companies now are coming back and saying, well, we really kind of want people to come back to work. And we're hearing that a lot of people actually are welcoming that. Maybe not five
Hmm.
days a week, but they're saying, man, I would just miss being around people. I just
Yeah.
like the creative aspects of hanging out
Sure.
and trading notes, and so I think we're living in this, again, very transformative time. Everything
Yeah.
is being transformed before our very eyes.
Yeah, well, I like your idea of, and I wouldn't categorize it as just young people, but in large part, younger people that are going to move to these bigger cities to get their experience. I think that also applies to the younger companies too in the startup
Yeah,
phase. As they get into growth,
right,
maybe second stage, and they get some momentum.
right.
I think that these emerging cities, it's smart for them to reach out and understand who these companies are that are away and
Yes,
attract them back if they have
great
been
point.
there before. Or so, it's starting to make more sense to me, sort of like this butterfly effect,
Yeah,
more so than just a linear path of
absolutely.
how this works. Yeah.
Completely agree. And I think investors are wising up to this too, right? So if you, for example, start a company in a small town in Minnesota and you go out to Silicon Valley and get your funding and you establish a great network out there, I just think investors are getting a little bit more flexible about it
Yeah.
too, because there is at least an increasing number of entrepreneurs who are saying, I can't do the rat race anymore, right? And
Yes.
so maybe it takes me longer to grow my company.
Right.
Maybe I have to go to not just Silicon Valley sources for funding, but other networks in the upper Midwest.
Sure.
But more and more people are making those
Yeah,
choices.
and a lot of investors are understanding that for themselves personally too, so they're able to
Yes,
connect with that narrative.
that's right.
You know,
Think about all the famous investors that I look back at, like my time during the Austin Tech Council when we were so desperate for venture capitalists to pay attention to Austin, right? This was 15 years ago, so please keep that in mind. But there were so many investors that we were chasing, both in Silicon Valley and even on the East Coast. And now some of those same entities are living in Austin.
yeah,
If you would have told me that 10 years ago, I'd be like, no way. It's
yeah,
great. It's
it,
refreshing, right?
yeah, it is. It's so interesting.
Yeah, I have nothing against Silicon Valley or Seattle
Yeah,
or Boston, right? The overwhelming majority of all that venture capital is still flowing through,
yes,
roughly five markets on both coasts.
yeah,
And I don't have anything against that, but I'm really excited about the fact that investors and entrepreneurs, folks are starting to understand that we have assets. There are all kinds of assets in the
yeah,
middle US, right? We
yeah,
have crazy creative people. They fix things, they solve things. Our engineering
yeah,
talent is crazy deep. So
yeah. I
anyway,
think it takes people like you to come in and open the eyes of cities and entrepreneurs to what is possible, because they're, again, working on their businesses, or they're working in their cities
right,
with other agendas, and they don't see that there's a connection that can be made there.
right.
So I think that, yeah, I think that work is really good work. A question came up in my mind, and this kind of goes back to vision a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
um, but I'm curious, what's the primary reason that you've seen that cities want to become, if we're to call it innovation cities, right?
Yes.
When you work with someone, what's the primary reason that they want to move?
Yeah. Short answer, single word, talent.
Okay.
I think that for decades, a lot of our cities have suffered from the loss of especially their skilled talent,
Hmm.
right? There are many parts of the middle US where as a kid, oh, by the way, I can relate to this, right? I was raised
Hmm.
in a very rural part of Champaign County and got to the big city of Champaign-Urbana, and I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? This is exciting. And then I started going to Chicago, and then I started going to Indianapolis. And so if you don't have enough to offer, if you're not catering to the career and lifestyle needs of your next generation. And by the way, if you're not thinking about that now, you should now be thinking about the talent that you need to retain 20 years from now in your
Yes.
city, right?
Yes.
And so that's the short answer. Cities, and there is an absolute direct effect when it comes to economic impact, right?
Mhm.
You've mentioned it before. I mean, you're talking about all kinds of losses there economically, and And then that becomes sort of this self-fulfilling cycle, right? If
Yeah.
you have young people that are leaving, the community just in general starts to get a reputation, and then you lose your amenities, and it just becomes a pretty negative. I mean, I've witnessed this again. I'm
Yeah.
coming back to my smaller hometowns, plural, in the rural parts of Illinois, and just literally seeing businesses are shuttering every day, every year, and young
Hmm.
people are not coming back, and they're
Yeah.
saying, I'm going to Chicago and I'm not ever coming. I mean, so I think the good news is we are awake now, I think, as a country, most of us, right? And
Hmm.
again, I have to give all of the middle US leaders that we've been working with and talking to for the last, we're almost going on 10 years of services now, right? 10 years of service. And so there has, in the last 2 to 3 years, been this massive awakening. COVID helped fuel that, I think. But
Yeah.
I think people are figuring out they need to keep their young people. That's a direct quote from a mayor that we worked with in southeastern Wisconsin. He, in
Yeah.
the first meeting we had with him, we sat down and he said, I said, well, why are we here? Why did you call us in to help? And he said, I'm losing my young people and I don't know
Yeah.
how to stop it. Oh gosh. Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at, is that question right there. Why are you here is a great way to start the relationship, I think, just from a business standpoint.
Yeah.
But I think their answer is going to be so hopefully transparent and honest,
Yes.
to say, okay, this is what we're working towards. And
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. If I had to guess, that would be up there, maybe my top three guesses on why a lot of these smaller cities are looking for help.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. One really quick thing I'll add is maybe
Hmm.
answer number two, and that has to do with sort of how we started this phone call, Lee, and that is cities are starting to understand that it can't just be about a single entity solution, right? There
Yeah.
can't be a single entity leader. They are truly recognizing that because of the power of the disruptive power of technology, you will either be left behind if you continue to do business, economic business, in the same way that you've been doing it, or you can get out there, embrace the uncertainty that we all feel, right? As it relates,
Yeah.
especially to AI and just the impact of future technologies. And you can start today to build the trust, right? That process takes time
Hmm.
with your other, key regional leaders. And, when we know that by the time the technology sort of hits the fan, if you will, what you've done, if you're successful, is you have created this fabric of trust, and you're solving very complex technology driven challenges.
Hmm.
You're solving those challenges with other bright minds within
Yeah.
your region, right? Because there's not a single person nobody understands what's going to happen with AI. We certainly don't know what's going
Yeah.
to happen with quantum, what's going to happen with biopharmaceutical technology, genomics. I mean, name a technology. No one has
Yeah.
really sort of an understanding of what the future looks like. If you would have told us a few years ago that we'd suffer from a global pandemic,
Yeah.
no one had that on their radar. But if you're successful as a region and a regional leader, whether you're leading with a business lens or leading with a public, sort of perspective, you have to be able to literally lean on your fellow leaders to help really overcome what we know are going to be some barriers, right? We're going to have to
Yeah.
solve for job loss and job shifting and disruption.
Yeah, that helps me a lot to understand this more fully, because the question that I wanted to kind of end this with was, how do you plan for what will be relevant in 5 years or 10 years from now as you're building out infrastructure? And I
Mhm.
think, and I want you to answer that question, but I think what you're getting at is when you start to build these connections between all of these different entities, and it stops the siloed effect,
Yes,
starts everyone working together, then everyone is working towards this vision of what it should be,
that's
and
right.
they can all change together along the way.
You've got it. You absolutely answered the question, right?
Okay.
We try to help our clients on a practical level just get educated about what technology, subject matter experts, where
Hmm.
they see aspects of artificial intelligence in manufacturing or
Hmm.
genomics and fill in the blank. There is typically a combination of technologies that will really warrant the most disruption and opportunity. Right? We have to say that in the
Right.
same breath. So
Right.
we have a number of different data sources. We have a national network of SMEs that we bring in to talk to clients that have really deep, crazy deep technical expertise,
Hmm.
and they can articulate sort of where they think that industry or that technology is headed. That's important, right? Because
Very important. Yeah.
we're not having those, we're not reading those articles in the Wall Street Journal every day, right? Most of us don't have an understanding of really what quantum is or how it's going to impact society. Same with AI. And so that's sort of the first step. But you hit the nail on the head, and the more important nail, which is, you know, in the past, these entities have been acting alone. They have maybe been equipped to answer certain questions on their own in this siloed environment, but the questions now that are being brought forward with the complexities of technology cannot be answered in a siloed environment.
Hmm.
And so again, to your point, what we're doing now is setting up new systems, and systems that actually adhere to what we commonly understand to be pro business or technology sort of cultural attributes, right?
Hmm.
This new fabric, this new group is being transparent with one another. They're not coming to the table with all the answers. In fact, they're coming to the table with a lot of vulnerabilities and they're
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah. Right.
we have no idea how to train our candidates in artificial intelligence, right?
Hmm.
So, but then again, what you're doing is you're combining forces. You are combining strengths. You're sort of shoring up one another's gaps or
Hmm.
misunderstandings or miscommunications, and you're developing this engine and this roadmap together. Where at the very least, you're embracing the uncertainty of it all. Right? It's
Right.
another key to success.
Right. I have this sort of philosophy that I'm been saying a lot lately, and I'm going to continue to say as we work with our clients on the signal media side and with my consulting clients, and even here is that the future. I think the future is human. It's sort of
Yeah.
powered by AI.
Yes.
And I think that all of what you're talking about having cities do is the connection piece. I mean, it's sort of a cliche, but essentially what we're talking about is building community,
Yes.
a community among the different domain leaders. And so that when there's
Right.
community, then there's everything, everything can be worked out towards a collective vision. That's probably the more hard part of the whole thing. But assuming that there's some general vision that the city's going and you have these collective leaders now connected, you're talking about the SMEs, just being connected to those people
Yes.
is a huge deal
That's right.
because what they said today is going to be different than what they're going to say in 18 months.
No
And so being
question.
able to call them back and say, hey, tell us again, what's the weather report look like?
That's
You
right.
know,
Yeah.
I think that is the core piece to all of this working. Obviously, vision is a huge piece of this,
Mhm.
but that community aspect
You got it.
is the next piece.
No, you are 110% accurate. The overwhelming majority of the work that we do, we certainly over 10, actually, if not 20 years, have developed really solid methodologies, right? But in terms of our consulting practice, and we certainly have we have this amazing national network, and we have great experience over the last 20 years. And so we're at a place where we can very quickly recognize patterns, right?
Hmm.
But to your point, at the end of the day, what we do is solidly human based. We are
Yeah.
coming into markets. A client will call us and say, well, help us win this major federal grant because we're looking to infuse $50 million worth of investment into our market. And we say, absolutely, we can help you with that. But let's first have a conversation about what kind of a coalition, what kind of fabric do you have to support, by the way, the future. Let's say you get the 50 million, and what is your story, what's your narrative, what's your
Hmm.
vision, and most importantly, who is going to help you
Hmm.
accomplish this $50 million goal, right?
Right.
Who is sitting next to you? And so we spend, frankly, the most number of hours helping our clients develop definitions for partner strengths. We help them really think about truly leadership profiles, right? Engagement strategies. It's very much still, thankfully, a human-based business.
It's awesome. Julie,
Yeah,
this has been really fun. Thank you so much for coming on.
I enjoyed
Such
it.
a great interview and interesting topic. Some very different than anything I've had on so far. So thanks for that.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it also. And Lee, thank you again for your leadership. Keep doing what you're doing. We need more intelligent, speakers and spokespersons and advocates and champions, especially as it relates to our entrepreneurs and our, CEOs and growth leaders. We can't get enough. So I really
Thanks.
appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Yeah, well, it's fun.
It was
If
fun.
I want to send people your way that are listening to this and they want to find you, how can they find you?
Yes, check out our website. We've got a form there that will come directly actually into my inbox, and that URL is waymaker-group.com.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lee.